June 13th, 2016. Sony take the stage at E3. The crowd silences for the games being previewed, to then boom with excitement as Kratos shows his face.
Then show me what you know. I am hungry.
Days Gone's preview was up next, followed by the long-awaited showcase and release date of The Last Guardian. The beautiful Horizon Zero Dawn followed that, which was then followed up by Detroit Become Human. Everything was getting such amazing reception. But then a screen shows up. Full PlayStation virtual reality experience.
They will kill you. You get out now.
The crowd is silent. The atmosphere is dark, ominous, creepy, almost unsettling. A VHS tape plays, showing a questionable series of events.
Okay. What the fuck am I supposed to do? God damn it. I'm probably gonna end up like Andre.
The rendition of Go Tell Aunt Rhody plays. And there it is. Resident Evil 7 appears on the screen, followed by a message that the demo will be playable that very night. This is the beginning of our dive into how Resident Evil 7 became the game responsible for popularizing Resident Evil speedrunning. The entire Resident Evil community boomed with excitement upon the game's trailer. Everyone could not stop talking about every possible thing we may witness in the upcoming continuation of the series. Extensive research of the demo began, and many veterans uncovered truly wild things. A part of this gigantic community is a very niche group of individuals, people who put themselves to the test of time. Speedrunners. For years, Resident Evil speedrunning was known to have a large amount of runners, spanning many games, but maintained a smaller, tight-knit community. In fact, the horror speedrunning community was quite small for many, many years. Communities for lesser-known horror titles were a handful of people, and activity was completely dead for long periods of time. Resident Evil was always the series that stood out in the genre. Despite so many runners, the Resident Evil community never really got a lot of attention from the larger speedrunning scene, nor was it ever close to being as popular to watch as dozens of other games and series. It was a robust community, but pretty low-key.
Very good. All right. 3, 2, 1, go.
The most attention it ever got was from Games Done Quick, where it always received a positive response from the crowds and viewers alike. These events definitely gave the scene a bit of a boost at times, but not enough to really encourage a lot of new runners. I'd say this is because of the very basic mechanics and lack of game-breaking tricks in most of the games. Without some experience of the series, it's hard to understand how these simplistic mechanics become so difficult to execute perfectly. And I mean perfectly. Perfect movement, perfect menuing, perfect boss fights. Along with that, some games in this series involve a heavy amount of luck. It may not be flashy most of the time, but it is very impressive to see Resident Evil being played at such a high level. Years before the announcement of Resident Evil 7, it was pretty common to see Resident Evil 1, 2, 3, or 4 amongst the top 100 active games on Speedrun.com. A lot of these runners stream their runs on Twitch and also upload them to YouTube or other alternative sites. Some of the games even had hundreds of thousands of views at the time, before the series' rise in popularity. It was plain to see the runs had an audience, and there were plenty of runners to keep pushing down the times. Because of this, and the continuous rising popularity of streaming and content creation, Resident Evil 7 seemed like it was the perfect opportunity for the existing community to dive headfirst into a new game. January 23rd comes, and many content creators were given permission to stream the game early, as well as release videos from what they had played a week or so beforehand. Release date viewership on Twitch and YouTube was at an all-time high for the series, and it wasn't even out yet. Within the first 24 hours, videos from so many people were uploaded and covered practically everything you could think of. Tips and tricks to beating Madhouse difficulty, guides for finding every collectible, achievement hunting, and even story explanations. Amongst the many streams and videos you would expect from a big new release were the handful of runners who had already attempted to speedrun the game without any routing or preparation.
Oh shit! Fuck, I forgot about that one! God damn it!
These streams gained traction very quickly. Most of these people took part in the New Game Plus run. Now, get this. In order to run New Game Plus, runners would already have needed to beat the game once to acquire the Madhouse difficulty and the Albert handgun. That's simple enough, but then they would also have to beat it again on Madhouse to acquire unlimited ammo. And then they would have to beat the game again in under 4 hours to acquire the circular saw, while also destroying all of the Mr. Everywhere bobbleheads to acquire the walking shoes. This meant that there were already dozens of people who had practically played the game non-stop since release, and they were also already attempting speedruns. And the game has been out for 1 day. I mean, things were escalating so quickly that the runs went from a little over 2 hours to 1 hour and 40 minutes within a 12-hour time span. This dramatic drop in time was primarily done by an already known RE4 runner named Sterling. His stream was getting so much attention, and his time was already getting so much lower that even Destructoid speedran an article on the 26th about his 1:51:02, claiming that the game was already being beaten in under 2 hours. This was massive. Funny enough, by the time that article was already out, Sterling had achieved the 142.
142.43, we subbed 143, baby!
After that, many runners started achieving similar times. Bakba Soup, Trance, Zarian, Distortion 2, Punchy, Nemi, and many more were all bringing their times down significantly. The forums on Speedrun.com were filled with questions, tricks, category discussions, in-game time scripts, and differences between versions. One of the most important discoveries for the game was also in the forums: the main house out-of-bounds trick. A way of manipulating Jack to grab you from behind, turn you around, and clip you through the wall at the end of the main hallway staircases. Potential skips were brewing for days after this. This skip allows you to pick up the red key card before fighting Jack in the basement, but a certain flag in the game's coding prevented runners from using it until over a year later. But we'll get more into that later. This was only 3 days after release, and there were already almost 50 runs completed by different people in various categories. 50 may not seem like a lot, but let me give you some perspective with examples of 2 other games that released in 2017 that you would expect to have a ton of activity. The Legend of Zelda: Breath of the Wild had about 20-ish fully completed runs in the first month. Resident Evil 7 had 100 plus runners in less than a week. For more perspective, later that year, Super Mario Odyssey, one of the biggest speed games ever, had 100 plus runners in the first week as well. Resident Evil 7 speedrunning was almost on the same level of activity and popularity as the most popular series for speedrunning of all time. 2 weeks after release, 200 people were running New Game Plus, and this number did not stop rising. Along with the New Game Plus category being ran so much, the first week showed promise for other categories as well. New Game Easy and Madhouse were both being routed and ran quite a bit. Exterminator and Plaku were showing pretty good potential in their runs of New Game Easy, while Carcinogen SDA and Jigsaw Killer opted for the Madhouse difficulty.
That's creepy.
People were even beating the game with only the knife, which wasn't even thought to be possible until runners discovered that the first Marguerite fight is in fact beatable without damaging her. Remember how I said Sterling achieved a 142 after the first 2 days? Well, by the end of the week, New Game Plus was at a 132. New boss strats, tiny movement tricks, optimal menus, they were all being hammered out and changed every day. It's exciting for sure, but definitely a bit draining. So much that some runners took a few days in between runs to avoid having to repeat this ongoing cycle of going to bed, waking up, and having to basically relearn a bunch of stuff. But for the content creators, that was gold. And this content is actually a huge factor in the game's rising popularity as well. I was a part of this content creation gold, streaming the game daily for long hours, doing multiple playthroughs with various setups, and testing stuff for other runners, and even doing runs myself. Please get out of the elevator, dude. Oh my god, what are you doing? I was even the first person to discover multiple out-of-bounds routes that could have potentially cut the game by an entire 20 to 30 minutes, but alas, the game is made so well that sequence breaking it is seemingly impossible outside of the red keycard strat. But wow, did this make for some exciting content and some really fun streams. This also brought about a lot of positivity amongst runners and streamers who were simply enjoying the game and seeing growth and gains from a series that wasn't necessarily that popular on Twitch beforehand. Resident Evil 7 really brought a lot of new people to the scene, and introduced them to veterans of the series who streamed the games often. People who had never seen Resident Evil speedruns were suddenly intrigued by Resident Evil 7's huge boom in activity, and it led them down a path that a lot of us have been down. The rabbit hole of YouTube. Typing Resident Evil, insert number or name here, speedrun in the search bar, and finding so many results they never thought existed. Thanks to Resident Evil 7, the Resident Evil speedrunning community finally had their first time in the spotlight outside of the hour or two that it had on Games Done Quick maybe twice a year. It was their chance to shine bright and show that the horror community had some serious talent. Soon enough, more and more runners started getting even more love as the Resident Evil 7 craze transferred over to other games in the series, and even other games in the horror community in general. Speaking of Games Done Quick, a lot of dedicated viewers of GDQ were more likely to pick up Resident Evil 7 now, knowing that it's the newest game in the series, and was one of the most accessible and simple runs to learn. Resident Evil 1996, the OG, by Raw Derps, and Resident Evil Code Veronica by Pessimism were the two Resident Evil runs performed at SGDQ 2017. Despite being great runs, the activity for those games did not spike. It was still Resident Evil 7 spiking in activity. Over the course of the next few months after SGDQ, competition between top runners grew fierce, and saving time started to become difficult without forming some new strategies. Because of this, a lot of these top runners would grind the game for hours and hours with no improvement, and you would think people would stop watching as much, but people were still watching intently, and new runners were making their way into the scene and climbing the boards. One of which was Sarthex, who would keep the New Game Plus world record at 129.31 for 13 months. Despite this, there was still a ton of activity for the category. Runners were making their way into the top 10, and some of them were even snagging the legendary sub 130.
Ja! Die ersten Erfolge von 1:29:54. Hype, ja!
Viewership in general did take a bit of a dip during some of these months, but there was a pretty large increase in a certain month as well.
And it does look like we're ready to throw it over to Carcinogen for Resident Evil 7 Biohazard New Game Madhouse.
January 9th, 2018. Games Done Quick was already a few days in, and Resident Evil 7 would have its first showcase at the event. Carcinogen SDA took the stage with New Game Madhouse, and one of the most popular GDQ runs of all time began. And what a treat it was. This run was highly anticipated, and for the time, it was a very solid showcase that didn't disappoint.
Where's she gonna pop out?
Where is she? Behind you. Yeah, there she is.
Oh, God.
Whether you were experienced with the game or not, it was an enjoyable run to watch.
Oh, man.
I'm not even biased because I was on commentary. Yeah, you see that guy? Yeah, that guy, right there. Yeah, that's me. Yeah. The run was the second most popular run of the entire event, and it's still in the top 10 most viewed runs on the GDQ YouTube channel, with 2.2 million views. After this run, it was no surprise that people were looking up all of the various runs of Resident Evil 7 and diving into running the game themselves. The Naughty Hero and End of Zoe DLCs had just released a few weeks before this as well, so runs for those were pretty fresh. Those DLCs were actually a really good start for some people who were interested in running, as they were much shorter and a bit less intimidating. This gave runners something new to optimize their times in, while not having to spend as many hours doing attempts. Although, the main game runs were still the ones with the most activity. Thanks to that GDQ run, a lot of people were introduced to Resident Evil 7 speedrunning, and it wasn't the only big boost the game got in 2018 either. The next two were even more important, as they would bring old runners back into the scene and also encourage a wave of new world records across almost all categories. May 29th, 2018. A skip called Lantern Skip was found. To do this, you would have to line yourself up in a very specific spot, and then drop down into the hole where you fought Marge for the first time. When done correctly, the game will progress as normal, without the need to interact with the lantern door before the phone call. Therefore, Marge will take the lantern and retreat to the greenhouse without having to spend the time running to the lantern door and back. And this didn't save a ton of time, but it was still very important as the competition grew fierce in the months after this. While this discovery was pretty big, it wasn't as big as the next one. 1 month later, on June 28th, Ross Rossi found a way to finally execute the out of bounds in a useful way by picking up the red keycard early without soft locking. Now, this was done by making Jack follow you through the hallway after dropping down from the bathroom, and then shooting him to stun him. This would give you the time to get far away enough from Jack to have the game let you solve the Eagle puzzle, but still have Jack close by to perform the out of bounds afterwards. The Eagle puzzle is what allows you to progress the game after obtaining the red keycard early, and the skip itself allowed you to pick up some enhanced handgun ammo early as well. This was a big discovery and made it much more feasible to acquire new records in almost every category. Upon these new discoveries, plenty of runners implemented them into their runs, and former runners returned to the game as well. This caused a big spike in activity and provided a ton of new content for everyone to enjoy yet again. After runners started working on getting new personal best times with the out of bounds and lantern skip, Sarthex's PC New Game Plus record was practically obsolete. The first runner to achieve a new record with the out of bounds was none other than the person who found out how to implement it in the first place. Ross Rossi achieved a 1:29:33 on his PlayStation 4, and everyone knew this would really shake things up. Just a week after the discovery, Ticknaldo achieved a 1:29:13, successfully beating the 13-month-old PC New Game Plus record.
Uh-oh. Guys, Is it still? Is it still record? Yeah! Woo!
And a week after that, M. Dust achieved a 128.25, which was a whopping 48 seconds faster.
128.25, dude. Let's fucking go.
And a week after that, Distortion 2 returns to the game to achieve a 128.09. Even Horror Does Speedruns, a new game category runner who was fairly new at the time, entered the New Game Plus mix and achieved a 128 fairly quickly. Speaking of the new game category, Melon Turtle, Silurion, and MF Doom swapped records often for months before this discovery, and brought the category from a 133 to a 131. Sandy, with ones between each letter, I don't know how to say this guy's name, anyways. Sandy, Catlink, and Horror Does Speedruns were also all other notable runners of New Game, and they were all working hard to improve the category. The new Out of Bounds only boosted activity in this as well, and a couple weeks after its discovery, Horror Does Speedruns was the first runner to get a new record with the Out of Bounds, beating Silurion by a whopping 38 seconds. A similar tale to how New Game Plus started to look after the discovery. This is the time when Resident Evil 7 would see a lot of optimization and new tiny strats to save as much time as possible. It was truly a great showcase of community-driven work and dedication to the game. The Resident Evil speedrunning community grew so much just from this one game, and over the course of 2017 and 2018, there were almost 1,000 new Resident Evil speedrunners. Around 700 of them were purely from Resident Evil 7. This game is truly what made Resident Evil speedrunning popular, and it resulted in its community getting some serious recognition. More amazing marathon showcases, more viewership for various content creators, and way more praise from the speedrunning community for the dedication of runners from various games in the series. And it never truly stopped. Resident Evil 2 Remake came out, and well, that game has over 6,000 runs, with about 1,250 players total. Speedrun-wise, Resident Evil 3 Remake is also pretty active, but not as much as RE2 Remake. I'd say this is most likely because of negative reception it received from a lot of fans. You can't really run a game a whole lot if you don't like it, right? After Resident Evil 7's release, you can always expect the next game in the series to be a hit for speedrunning. Which leads me to my final point for this video.
Ethan Winters, welcome.
Another game with quadruple-digit runners within a year, like Resident Evil 2 Remake, a slow burner like Resident Evil 3 Remake, or somewhere in between like Resident Evil 7. Whichever one it may be, it's safe to say that Resident Evil 7 gave the Resident Evil speedrun community and the horror speedrunning community in general the time and the spotlight that it needed to become what it is today. So thank you, Resident Evil 7, and thank you to the Resident Evil 7 speedrunning community. Thanks to all of the people who put so much work into the game early on, and to the people who continue to put work in today. You're all seriously awesome, and I'm very happy to have been a part of it all since the very first day. May we continue to enjoy our time with the game and bond as a community over it. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you enjoyed my little shout-out video to a pretty cool community. If you haven't already done so, please take a moment to subscribe to the channel, give the video a like, and comment something you love about Resident Evil 7 or any of the runners from the Resident Evil speedrunning community. I also stream on Twitch full-time, so feel free to follow me on there, and tune in when I'm live. I speedrun quite a bit myself, and have a bunch of world records. Quite a few of them are here on this channel if you want to take a gander. I also want to give a huge thank you to Humbledon for editing this video, and I also want to thank all of the runners and Games Done Quick for allowing me to use their footage and give them some love in this video. Much love to you, and thanks again for watching, and I'll see you next time.